Hi, friends. Hope you're doing well. We're going to be doing our study in 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Amazing chapter. It's called the love chapter, so you got to like that. It's a very short one. It's only 13 verses, so we'll go right through it. Probably won't take a whole long time, but in and of itself, is some really important information that's there. Good to keep that in mind on what the gifts of God are and stuff like that. But let's jump right into it, because I just think it's kind of self-explanatory. So just reading through it, a lot of times you can glean what God is actually intending. That love has to be the underlying motive for how we deal with the world and how we deal with each other. If you don't have love there, your motives are going to be impure, and your actions in essence are going to be corrupted. We should always have one that starts with loving God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then love your neighbor as yourself, putting their well-being before your own, and learning to what you're doing for someone. And what you're trying to do is sharing the gospel, going out, going to food drives, whatever it is you're doing. If the motive isn't for love, then you're doing it for the wrong reason. You shouldn't be there in that sense. So let's keep that in mind. All right, let's go. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and do not have love, I become a noisy gong or clanging cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy, turn the page, and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and I surrender my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me for nothing. Love is patient, love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not brag and is not arrogant, does not act unbecomingly, it does not seek after its own. It is not provoked, does not take into account the wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. We'll stop right there for a second. When you go through it, it's just like, wow, that's the goal. And that should be your underlying drive as a Christian behind you, is love, compassion for other people, and having a genuine desire for the good of other people, and for the love for those you're trying to reach, and for those who are in the body. It doesn't stop once they become a Christian. No, they're saved now, I can forget them. Let's go save somebody else. Oh, we found them. Okay, they're saved. Let's go get somebody else. It's not, you're not collecting baskets of fruit. Got them in there. Okay, now we can just move on to the next one. No. They need to be discipled and loved and brought along and helped. And when they stumble and fall, they need to be corrected, and then they need to be brought back into fellowship, and then allow for that growth to take place, because they're going to stumble, they're going to fall, and that's part of it. And many people, unfortunately, what's being taught in many cases is an element of the gospel become morality. It's become an ideal of self-righteousness. That has replaced the real gospel. And that's a problem, so it's hard to have a discipleship, a real discipleship with anyone, if you don't first start and lay that foundation and what really is the gospel, what does salvation mean, and then have an element of true love, so that these people that you are bringing in have that same love, compassion for other people, and they're doing it for the right reasons, with the right motive, the right intentions, things like that. So very important. And I think this here is talking about that, having that humility of love and compassion, long-suffering, patience, enduring the things that are very difficult for us at times. And some people have a harder time for that. When they're insulted, they want to assault back. They want to strike out. Christians, you can't do that. You got to love and have compassion and patience. Doesn't mean you're a doormat and people run over you. You got to protect yourself. But it means you do so in love and kindness and charity, to the extent that you're humanly able. So anyway, continue on. It says, verse 8, love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away with. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there are knowledge, it will be done away with. For we know in part and prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I also have been fully known. But now faith, hope, love abide, these three. But the greatest of these is love. So he isn't saying that faith isn't important. And he's not saying that hope isn't important. What he's saying is love is got to be the foundation, the motivation behind your actions and your deeds. You know, if it's not, it's going to be you're going to get off the rails. You know, because your intentions are obviously going to be revealed to be something other than truly a heart of compassion and love for other people and a love for God. Because where it starts with that, you got to love God first. That should be your underlying motive. And then you need to love other people around you, have compassion for them, so that you're doing it with the right intentions, not for your own self-glorification, money, greed, power, possessions, office, notoriety, whatever it is. You're like the guy when Jesus talks about, doing it with the right intentions. When you give, don't let your left hand know what don't let your right hand know, don't let your left hand know what your right hand's doing. Don't go out and blow the flute when you're giving stuff to call the people so they can see you give some money to the poor. You're doing things in a right way. Doing it with the love, compassion for the reason because you love this person, not because you want people to recognize you and you want to be in a position of notoriety and, oh, he's such a wonderful, or she's such a wonderful person, and you've done this and that. You should be doing things in a way that is, glorifying what God has given you in your gifts, but is helping these people in a real way, or helping other people in a real way, or bringing people into faith, and using your talents that God has given you in an appropriate way. And that's what he's talking about. He says, and really what he's also saying is that, we know in part, we prophesy in part. We don't have all knowledge. There is a mystery to the gospel. There's certain people that think every single I needs to be dotted, every cross, every T crossed. You got your theology has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, A, B, C, D, E, F, everything. You got to know every aspect of theology. It has to be exactly like this, and if it's not, then you are all wrong, and you're not fit for the gospel, and you can't go out there, and you're a borderline heretic. I mean, that's how some Christians are. I've actually had a Christian say to me that if you believed in a pre-tribulation rapture, you're a heretic. I actually have had Christians tell me that. Because they've been so indoctrinated now into this concept that if anybody believes in that, they're somehow a heretic, when clearly that is not the case. And, that's just one example. There's lots of other ones too, but there's people who truly have that mindset. And, unless you believe exactly like they do, and there can be no mystery at all, you have to have the perfect theology. I had another one, so-called Christian, tell me that, basically, he was criticizing one group of Christians. He was actually a Catholic, and he was criticizing an element of Christians, earlier Christians, because they didn't have certain elements on theology is what he was addressing. And I was like, they had what they had, and they were faithful in what they had, and you're holding them to that example by your Catholic understanding of the 21st century, and you're applying that back to them and saying that they had something wrong, and therefore they were heretics. Now tell me that that's not a problem. And not only that, he was in essence trying to justify the murder of these groups by the Catholic Church, which killed these Christians. And he was basically talking about these, and it was we were having a conversation about the Valdos, the Valdensians, the Waldensians, and how the Catholic Church was justified in the murder of them because their theology wasn't right. Well, their theology actually was, in my opinion, far more accurate than the Catholic Church. Where he was coming from with that one was a whole other topic. But the whole point was that this guy's, he was son of a well-known person. I'm not going to say the name, but son of a well-known person in ministry. I don't have any. I don't think the guy in his notoriety is all that should be that notable, in my opinion, because his theology is definitely off. And come to find out, he hid what group he belonged to. He was part of Catholic Church, Eastern Church. He hid that. Wouldn't ever actually talk about that. Was invited on a lot of Christian shows, a lot of Christian ministries inviting him in. Come to find out, he's hiding this whole time. And if they knew it, they certainly didn't reveal it. And it's something that came out. And who knows what else. I haven't heard a lot about the guy in a sense, but his son was, one that was really promoting this. And he was actually promoting violence today. In a sense, and that was something that very interesting. So yeah, I mean, it was we had this debate anyway, and it was an interesting thing that it was where he was going with it. Hopefully, Lord willing, he's changed his mind, and hopefully, Lord willing, he's He's accepted the true faith of Jesus Christ and not trusting in an organization and the works associated with it, which is what he was really promoting, was Eastern Catholicism, Eastern Orthodox Catholicism. And I was trying to point out to him that that element of belief has got serious problems as well, and he was basically going on about that. And then I've met everybody in between. So I've had people on the Protestant side tell you're a heretic if you believe in the pre-tribulation rapture. I've had that happen. Seen that from a person who I otherwise would respect. I would call him a Christian brother, but either maybe it was just slipped off his tongue, I don't know, but he did clearly say that the person who's believes in that would be a heretic. And I was like, wow, that's insane, because what he was basically promoting was post-tribulation, as a post-tribulation belief of a rapture. And the problem you have, there's a lot of problems with that belief, by the way, and reconciling it with actually Revelation. It was very fascinating, because what his argumentation primarily focused in Matthew 24, little mentions of Mark 13 and 21, obviously, but when you actually go through the book of Revelation, which is really one of the major letters given to us of prophecy in and of itself, the whole nature of the book is prophecy. It kind of defeats, in my opinion, the post-tribulation rapture view. But in any case, how they felt about it, it was really fascinating to me, and how they were so, it almost made themselves look like they were martyrs. They were, being persecuted by Christians, because they weren't being invited on various prophecy conferences and that kind of stuff, because they held to a post-tribulation worldview. Well, no, they're not inviting you because you have a different worldview, and the whole thing of prophecy primarily is a pre-tribulation rapture, because that's the one that best harmonizes end times prophecy. Are there certain issues there? Certainly is, and everybody has a little bit of a variance, a different understanding, but a pre-tribulation worldview best harmonizes the end times rapture text. 1 Thessalonians 4:13 through 18, and 2 Thessalonians, where it talks about it, or 1 Corinthians 15, which we'll get into here pretty soon. Basically 51 through 53, roughly, a little bit more than that. But in any case, that's what it's talking about. And so it's clearly talking about a tribulation or a rapture event, a snatching away, these kind of things that we talked about. They agree with that, but it did get a little weird and wonky. How people can sometimes really attack people if you don't have exactly their worldview, exactly the way they want, teach how they want. And that's a real danger when you're like that. Not saying that you shouldn't be firm in what you believe, but remember, love should be the underlying current of everything that you do as a Christian. And it's okay to disagree. It's okay to say, hey, I disagree with you on this. I can disagree with a Catholic and still tell them I love them and care about them, which I do. That's the reason why I'm taking the time to talk to them. Otherwise, why would I do it? Why put yourself in that position? But you care about them. You love them. You want them to be saved. You want them to have eternal life. Nobody wants you, unless you're just a really diabolically evil person. If you know the gospel and you know the reality of salvation and eternal damnation, you're going to have a love and compassion for other people that they're saved, especially the people around you. Otherwise, my goodness, you really need to examine your heart. You should have a love and compassion for other people so that you want to share the gospel so that they're saved. It isn't that, hey, I know and you don't, you're ignorant and I'm right. I mean, if that's your intentions, it's a game to you. It's a sporting event, you got to win. To me, there's a problem there. It's not coming from a genuine heart. It's not coming from love and compassion. No, it's not about you being right and somebody else being wrong. I can totally get something wrong, and many other Christians would say exactly the same thing. But that's why we examine Scripture. That's why we're in the Word. That's why we do our Bible studies. That's why we study in Scripture, to make sure that we're right. We're dividing that Word properly and correctly. Do we always get it right? Obviously, no. And that's what Paul's talking about. He said, we know in part, we prophesy in part. None of us has begun all of it. And there is an element of mystery to certain things. Not every I is dotted, not every T is crossed. And you have to remember that. And that's why it's good to have compassion and patience for other people, because maybe they're right on certain issues. Now, there are elements where you have to be clear cut. When they start bringing in teachings that like in the case of works salvation, wait a minute. Now we know for sure that you've crossed the line. It's absolutely pretty straightforward. It's absolutely straightforward that, salvation is by faith alone in Jesus Christ alone. You're bringing in something else. That's another gospel. We have to separate. either you have to change what you're doing, or that's a point where you have to firmly but lovingly say no. We have to separate because you've gone down a road that is wrong. But where it's not so clear cut, where there should be charity involved, compassion, then patience with someone else, and look at it from their vantage point, where maybe they could be right, maybe they're right in certain areas, and it's important to have that kind of compassion in your ministry, your personal walk. Not a know-it-all, do it, only do it all. You got to do it. It's got to be done your way to be done right, and that kind of stuff. That's the wrong attitude to have, in my opinion. It should definitely be one of love, compassion, and patience, and all those things that he talked about before. Where it talks about love. Love is kind. Love is not jealous. Love is not arrogant. Love is not unbecoming. Love is not does not provoke. It is not when wronged. It suffers. All those elements. People seem to throw that out the window. Who cares? I'm right. Let's get it down. I'm gonna. You're gonna change your theology. I'm gonna beat the crap out of you. That's how a lot of people act. It's like, my goodness. What did you read the rest of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, the love chapter? You really need to read it and take it to heart. That's what I would say to a person like that. But there's people, hey, that's how they walk and carry themselves, and it's really unfortunate. Again, examine yourself to see if you're in their faith. That's what I would say. But I love where Paul ends with that. Here's a guy who's an apostle, who had visions, directly taught the gospel by Jesus Christ himself, brought that in, became the chief theologian in the church. To this day, his letters are the most prominent when it comes to Christian theology. Most things in Christian theology are based a lot upon what he himself brought to it as he was revealed through his divine revelation. Again, people can't get revelation. It's like, oh my goodness. So, I love how he humbly comes to this and says to these people in Corinth, that not we don't know all things. When I was a child, I acted like a child. I put away those things now. I'm walking in the faith. I'm striving to be a mature believer. I'm doing so with humility and love and compassion. And someday is going to come when I'm going to see Christ face to face, and when I'm going to know all things, and I'm not going to be in this mystery of not knowing everything. But for now, we only know what we know, and we need to have some compassion where there needs to be compassion, have some charity where there needs to be charity. And we didn't have firmness where there needs to be firmness, But distinguishing those things are very important. That's why we have, mature believers, mature brothers, overseers, pastors, that kind of stuff, so that we can avoid false teachings that come into the church. Anyway, short chapter, but a lot of really good stuff there. One of my favorite chapters in the Bible, because it does really emphasize where the heart of the gospel and the Christian walk is at. And that's in love, compassion, patience, long-suffering, enduring, and those things that we all should learn to incorporate into our life, into our actions, our words. It's easy to be mean and unkind and selfish, but at the end of the day, for what purpose? If you're really reflecting Christ, then shouldn't it be like Him? He was long-suffering, patient, kind, loving, charitable, willingly going to the cross for our sins. If nothing else, that this week of this Holy Week of Palm Sunday, as we go into the resurrection, should make you contemplate that and think about that. God coming down and taking on flesh, lowering Himself, to be beaten, whipped, and killed and murdered for your salvation. Shouldn't that humble you just a little bit? I hope it does. Anyway, God bless you. Stay in the faith. Keep looking up. I believe the Lord's coming for us soon. God bless.